That's good. So, what have we been covering so far? In this chapter, Krishna talks about the Lord's Prakriti. And again, this is nomenclature, this is jargon borrowed from the Sankhya philosophy. The Sankhya philosophy, we have Purusha, spirit, Prakriti, matter. It's dualistic. Gita is non-dualistic. So we're using the terms of the Sankhya philosophy, but redefining them. So Krishna starts out talking about the Lord's lower Prakriti, basically the body, the mind, the intellect, the ego sense. He calls this his lower Prakriti, meaning our equipment. Then he says, but I have a higher Prakriti, a higher nature, which is the life force in all beings. And he says, all this is strung on me like gems on a thread, Mani Sutre. So whatever being there is, the consciousness, the vitality, the very being of them is Krishna. Now, remember, when Krishna talks about himself, he's talking about the self, meaning he's talking about you, your essential nature. So we have this whole idea of the lower nature of consciousness. Another technical term we have is Saguna Brahman, Brahman with qualities, consciousness with qualities, and Nirguna Brahman, Brahman without qualities. Meaning there's what we call a sentient phase, a dimension of our being that's ever the knower, the awarer. And we have an inert or insentient phase, meaning all the stuff I know. One thought can't see another thought. One feeling can't see your nose. With reference to me, all physical phenomena, all feelings, all thoughts are not in and of themselves sentient. They are jada, they are inert. I am the knower. So I am not the body, I am not the feelings, I am not the thoughts. I'm not even the ego sense, because I see it rise and fall. I'm not even pure ignorance. Who am I? I am that awareing principle, pure being. And whatever is, whatever has any vitality, it is Krishna, it is the self that empowers it. Now, this relationless relationship can be difficult to understand. So at the earlier part of the chapter, Krishna was saying, I am in everything. All this is strung on me like gems or jewels on a thread. Then a couple weeks ago, he said, well, actually, I am not in them. They are in me. And this becomes easy to understand if we go to the dream state. You are the God of your dream. You are Mini Ishwara. So in the dream, my mind, as it were, refracts, splinters into a dream ego, identified with a dream body, peeping out with a locus perception, looking at a dream world. And inside I have dream thoughts and feelings. But all of it is my one mind, which appears as an individual knower, the act of knowing, and everything known. All this is no different. All of this is nothing but the play of consciousness. The difference is who's doing the dreaming. Your dream is contained within your own individual mind. I don't know what you dream. You don't know what I dream. But it is the Lord, it is Krishna, who's dreaming all this. And just as you are deluded by your dream, but you're not deluded if you just have an imagination, so also, macrocosmically, all the beings in the creation, even though the self in them is Krishna, they don't know it. But Krishna, meaning the self, is not really deluded by them. So that kind of catches us up where we are. Any questions about this before we move on?
What chapter are we on?
Chapter 7, and we're going to start on verse 18 tonight. All right, Priya, or not Priya, Deepa, will you help us out, please?
Sure. Udara sarva evaite jnani tvatmeva me matam astita sahi dharma mamevannuttamam gatim. Noble indeed are all these, but the wise man I deem as my very self. For steadfast in mind, he is established in me alone as the supreme goal.
Okay, so let's back up a bit. Last week we ended with the three kinds of people who approach spirituality. And the first one was the discontented, meaning I'm suffering. I don't like my life. My relationships are bad. My health is bad. I've suffered a great loss. A lover or a family member has died. I've been fired from the job that I loved. The discontented. Deepa, help me out. I'm having a senior moment. What was the second one? Can you flip back to the verse before?
Yes, looking it up. Just a second.
I think it was those who want wealth, was it? No.
So, four kinds of virtuous men worship me, O Arjuna: the dissatisfied, the seeker of systemized knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the wise.
Okay, there's four, not three. We did the discontented, those who want to figure it out, systematized knowledge, those who dive in and they study astrology and they want to study all the lists of categories and they're going to learn all the Vedas and they want to read all the commentaries. They think that it's figure outable. So they come to God because they want truth. These are the philosophers. These are the philosophers, the academicians. And those people seek to know the truth. The third is those who want wealth. This is not as evident to Westerners, but in Hindu philosophy and in Hindu religious practice, the idea of the gods is much different than in the West. In the West, God, hello? Turn your mic off unless you're asking a question. So in the West, we think of God as the Almighty, the All-Powerful, and our job is to surrender to God. In Hinduism, the various gods are the presiding principles over human activity or the forces of nature. Sometimes it means the sense organs. So, for example, if you're a Hindu and your uncle is opening up a shop, what's the thing he's going to do? Are you the only Indian with us? No, we have Priya as well as Deepa. But Deepa, you would know. What does the uncle do if he's going to open up a shop? If he does a puja, what does he do?
He prays to the goddess of wealth and the god that removes obstacles, Ganesha.
Yeah. So you propitiate Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. You hire a priest, have the priest come in and do a puja, or you pray to Lord Ganesh. You see, the remover of obstacles. Because in Hinduism, the idea is you can control the gods through sacrifice. You control the gods through sacrifice. If you do the right Vedic sacrifice, you can get the god to give you what you want. So this is what Krishna means here by the person who wants wealth. It's not just money. It's anything that I want. Not too much different in the West when a person says, oh God, if you get me out of this jam, I got a DWI. I'll never do that again. Please, God. We ask God to help us out. So it's the same idea. I want something from the infinite. Now, we ended this whole section last week with the understanding that few of us come to the infinite with pure motives. And guess what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why we come to God, just that we come to God. And now this week's verse 18, but the best are the wise, meaning those who come to God for God's sake. Let me see if I can give you a worldly parallel. So when kids are college age, at least here in the United States, you have a break between classes, and what do? You take all your dirty clothes and you throw them into a bag, and you put them in the back of the car, and you drive home to your parents. And then you dump the duffel bag in the laundry room because mom will do the laundry. Then you go into the kitchen and say, what's for dinner, mom? And then somewhere later in the evening, you go into the study and you say, Dad, I've run out of money. Can you write me a check? Meaning, I love my parents, but I have needs, and that's what I go to them for. So we go home to get something from our parents. Teenagers do it all the time, and all over the world. But later on, when we get older, you may go home to visit your mama, and you don't want anything from her. You just want to be with your mama. You don't need advice. you don't need food, you don't need money, but you love your mama and you want to be with her. Likewise, there are those who go to God just for the love of God. Rare souls. Most of us have an agenda. And here Krishna is saying, those are the wise, and those are most dear to me. Does Krishna really have favorites? No. The love of Krishna, the love of God is like sunlight. It just shines. But the person who goes to God for God alone, who has matured enough spiritually, is the person who's willing to do what it takes to have this deep, deep entering into the self. That's what yoga means. It means union. Becoming sthita prajna, person of steady wisdom. Those are the best. Next verse.
Bahunam janmanamante Gyanvan mam prapadyate Vasudeva sarvamiti Samahatma sudurlabha. At the end of many births, the wise man comes to me, realizing that all this is Vasudeva, the innermost self. Such a great soul, Mahatma, is very hard to find.
Yes. So a Mahatma, a great soul. So Swamiji always used to say it's an evolution, not a revolution. And earlier on, remember Krishna asked, or Arjuna asked, what happens if I don't make it in this lifetime? And Krishna said, don't worry. You can't take your money, you can't take your friends, you can't take your property with you when you die, but you do take your yoga. So after many births, finally, the unfoldment of consciousness, the Chaitanya, happens. We awaken to the possibility of moksha, liberation. When we develop mature vairagya. Vairagya comes from the root raga, passion. V is a prefix, so we've transcended the ordinary attachments to the world. That same passion that drove us into the world now is driving us inward to God, to the self. The mind becomes purer and purer, so we can practice the viveka. Viveka means discrimination. What kind of discrimination? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real, the phenomenal world is illusory. This is known as Nitya, Anitya, Viveka, discrimination between the real and the unreal. And then what is the culmination of knowledge? I am not the body. I am not the mind. I am not the intellect. What am I? Aham Brahmasmi. I am that Brahman. Chidananda Rupaham. I am of the form of bliss consciousness. But also, Krishna says, a person of steady wisdom, the Mahatma, sees all this world as Vasudeva, meaning Krishna, meaning consciousness. So we have this one maxim, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, the world is illusory, the world is Vaitatya, falseness, the world is Pratibimba, like a reflection in a mirror. Oh, but wait a minute. Then the Upanishads thunder. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. All this is verily Brahman. Now wait, make up your mind. Is it all illusion or is it all God? Yes. Again, this becomes easier to understand if we go to the dream state. If you dream about a mango, what is the material cause of the mango of your dream? The very stuff of my mind. What's the instrument by which I made the mango? My mind. Who did it? Me. So even though the mango of my dream is mithya, illusion, vaitatya, false, pratibimba, like an image or a reflection in a mirror, it is also nothing but consciousness. So there's a practice that's implied here to move through the world, dialing down our compulsive reactivity. Can you take up the meditation that all this is like a dream? It's all leelas, the play of consciousness. Sarvamaya, Sarvamananda. All is Maya, all is bliss. The yogi practices not believing her mind. Whatever information comes to you, positive or negative, just let it pass through. No big deals. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Don't take yourself seriously. And don't take anybody else seriously either. Everybody, the only being of everybody is God. And everybody's equipment is acting in the only way they can, according to the force of the past. Just as your equipment is. And in the end, the ground of being is never really touched by. Any thoughts on this? All right, next one, Deepa.
Kame, can you hear me?
Yes.
Kame stes hritagyan prapadyantenya devataha tamatam niyamam masthaya prakritya niyata swaya. Those whose wisdom has been looted away by this or that desire go to other those whose wisdom has been looted away by this or that desire go to other gods, follow this or that rite, led by their own nature.
So, if you have a mind that's covered by ignorance, the technical term is avritti or avarana shakti, the veiling power of ignorance. That is immediately followed by another power called Vikshepa Shakti. Vikshepa comes from the root shipati, which means to like throw or hurl a spear. This is called the projecting power or the agitating power. And it produces three things, only three. The first we call jiva bhavana, the attitude or the feeling that I'm a person. Then that feeling of being a person feels incomplete. So there's a goal of some sort. And the goal only takes one of two forms. I either need to fix the world in order to be happy, or I need to fix me in order to be happy. If only I had the right boyfriend or girlfriend. If only I got rid of the boyfriend or girlfriend. If I only had a better job. If only a person out there would do what I want them to do. They'd only apologize to me. If they would only love me the way I want to be loved. Or it can be, if only I were smarter. If only I were taller. If only I weren't so broken. If only I didn't have this trauma. If only I didn't. So it's either the world or me. I'll be happy when. It'll be better if. And then the third element is what we call kartavya, obligatory actions, meaning I struggle towards that goal. My mind tells me that the resolution of the struggle of ego is what's going to make me happy. Those three elements, sense of individuality, a goal, and the compulsion to work toward that goal, the need to struggle. That is the mind, that is the world, that is my bondage, that is samsara, goes by many, 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 many names. And the root of it, the cause of it, is ignorance. This phenomenon is called adhyas, superimposition. Shankara has a classic image that he uses, the snake and the rope. So we usually tell a story. Once upon a time, there was a king. And he drank too much and he smoked too much dope. So what he would do would be to drink wine and smoke dope. And in the evening, when it was very hot, he liked his servants to draw him a nice warm bath, and he would soak in the tub before he retired at night. So this particular night, he's in the tub. He finishes his bath and he's fat. So when he got in the tub, the water spilled out over the tub. Marble floor. So he's finished with his bath. So he stands up and steps out of the bath and he steps on a cobra. Mind works very fast and he's thinking, don't move, don't move. And he's thinking, oh, the snake must have come into this part of the palace because it scented the moisture. I'm a dead man. It's going to turn around and bite me and I'm gone. So the servants hear him scream and they come in. He says, don't come any closer. There's a snake and it's going to bite me and I'm going to be dead. And the servant says, beg your pardon, your majesty, but you've stepped on a wet piece of rope. He looks down. There's no snake. It's a rope. So, did the snake turn into a rope? Where was the snake? Was it on the floor? Nope. It was in his mind. He superimposed the snake onto the rope. Adhyas, superimposition. Once he had knowledge of the rope, where did the snake go? Gone. Because it wasn't real. Now, if you have superimposed a snake onto a rope, maybe mantra will get rid of it. Rope, rope, rope. No, still a snake. Rope, rope. Is that going to work? No. Or the very foolish people. You go to a group of spiritual people and you say, I have been meditating for 20 years. I've had darshan with this Mahatma and that Mahatma, and I've sat with this guru, very famous guru. And now the head of my snake has turned into a rope. Is that how it works? And this is the most sad. Every morning I get up and I take a baseball bat and I beat on that snake. That's like those people who try to kill the ego. Is that going to work? No. How do you get rid of the snake whose cause is ignorance? Knowledge of the rope. Now notice what happened. The servant said, Your Majesty, it's not a snake, it's a rope. That's what we call indirect knowledge. That we get from the scripture, that we get from the guru. But what happened? The king looks down and he sees, oh, it's a rope. So what must you and I do? In a mind made very pure through detachment from our attachments to the world. We keep working on renouncing this false sense of self, this chitchaya, this shadow self, this phony self. The space between your thoughts, with your attention introverted. See if you can notice, Koham, who am I? When you go looking for the I, the phony self falls. You can't find a person. What you find is consciousness itself. It's vast and empty like the sky. Yet shines as being. And then those three elements fall. There's nothing to be achieved, nothing to be gained. The mind can abide in the self. It feels satisfied. Best definition of the person of knowledge. If we go back to second chapter, the 54th verse, Arjuna says, what are the signs of the man of wisdom? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they sit? And Krishna answers, when a person casts off all the desires of the mind, O Partha, and is satisfied in the self by the self. Two things. First, let go of the world. Second, tune up the mind. Let it be absorbed in the self. Then that person is said to be a person of steady wisdom. Or here Krishna uses the term Mahatma, a great soul. But if we're deluded, then we take the world as real. And here Krishna says they go to other gods. What does he mean by other gods? That doesn't mean I worship Agni or fire or Varuna, the sea, or Vayu, the wind. It doesn't mean that. If you want to know what your God is, you add an additional O to the word, G-O-O-D, because your God is your good. So you may do puja in the morning. Oh, yes, I believe in Lord Krishna. I do prayers to him every morning. But if all day long what you're interested in is money, and that's your good, you want to be wealthy, that's really your God. Or if you wake up in the morning and, oh, I'm so lonely. Oh, I'm lonely. I want a boyfriend. I want a girlfriend. I want to get married. That's your God. Or if you spend all your day being phony because you hunger for the approval of other people, that's your God. Why do we do that? No blame. We're not evil. We're just ignorant. It's because I have Jiva Bhavana, I think I'm a person. And I think the world of name and form, people, places, things, and conditions have the power to make me happy or unhappy. And I want it different than it is. And that's important. That's serious business. And the ego will tell you, if you want relief, you have to resolve the struggle of ego. And you may get what you want, but it's always temporary. And it's always limited and conditional. The Christian saint, Saint Augustine, says, "Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee." There's only one thing that's going to satisfy the human heart. There's only one lover who will never let you down. There's only one good that's not conditioned, that's always available, that's free, that never diminishes. And that's yourself. But if we do not know that by direct experience, here Krishna says, we're caught up in that rat race of the structure of ego and its demands. Going back to our snake and the rope, you either see the rope or you don't. And if you don't, the mind superimposes a snake or a line of water or a branch of a tree. It superimposes something. So if we do not know who we are, then that's the Varana Shakti, veiling power. Then comes the torturing, the troublesome, the affliction of Vikshepa Shakti. I'm a person and I suck and I need to go after the world and it sucks and I gotta really work hard. And that sucks. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse, please.
Yo yo yam yam tanum bhakta shraddhayarchitam ichhati tasya tasya chalam shraddham tameva vidhamyaham. Whatsoever form any devotee desires to worship with faith, that same faith of his I make firm and unflinching.
So this is what's so unusual. Whatever we have faith in, and we go after in ignorance, the Lord makes that faith firm. What does he mean by that? What he's talking about is what I call the pleasure principle. The psychologists have that term and they mean something different. But this is what happens. Because of the force of the past, I determine that something is dear to me. And the Sanskrit word is Priya. So we have a gal here tonight named Priya because she's dear to us. Now, some people like coffee, other people don't like it. They want tea. Some people like anchovies, other people don't. Ugh. Some people like men, some people like women. Some people don't like either. So we can go through the world and we cannot find any one thing that has pleasure or happiness as its dharma. Let's define the word dharma. The essence or the nature of a thing without which it would not be the thing that it is. So it's the essence of water to be wet. It's the essence of fire to burn. It's the essence of sugar to be sweet. So we cannot find anything out there that universally pleases everybody. But whatever it is that you want, when you get what you want, I'm happy now for a short period of time. So I, in my ignorance, attribute the joy-giving qualities to some person, place, thing, or situation. This poor prayer stone gets used as the widget. So the widget, whatever it is I want. Then what do? I buy it, I make it, I earn it, I invest in it, I steal it, I seduce it, I marry it. Whatever it is I do to get proximate to the object of desire. That technically is called moda, M-O-D-A. Then when desire and object of desire become one, oh yeah, pramoda, the point of pleasure. And for the ignorant, I attribute the pleasure to the object, and it impels me, it compels me to want to repeat it. And the more I repeat it, and the more joy I get from it, the firmer my conviction becomes. That's where the juice is. This is why people get addicted. Jung would say all of us have an addictive relationship with the world. For some people, they have addictions that aren't particularly socially acceptable. Others of us, the world applauds. Oh, yes, I have a job where I'm making $300,000 a year and I put in 80 hours of work a week. Oh, yeah. But what that does is build what we technically call a vasana, an impression in the mind, which covers the mind, and at a future time makes me want to repeat that action get that person, place, thing, or situation again. Now, the opposite also happens. If I have an experience and it terrifies me or grosses me out or I dislike it, I have the impression I'm never going to do that again. So we not only have raga, passion for things, but we have dvesha, aversion. And I avoid the things that I don't like, and I go after the things I like. And the more I live life that way, the deeper is my bondage to those things. So, Krishna, and what really happens, Krishna says, I make it firm. This is what really happens. Priya, I determine that the object is dear. Moda, I get proximate to it. Pramoda, I have the point of pleasure. When desire and object of desire become one, what really happens is for a moment my mind is freed from its longing. And I'm getting a taste of my self-nature. The earlier stages, the scriptures say you must give up your attachment to worldly enjoyments. Well, actually, that's only a partial truth. The real truth is there's no such thing as worldly enjoyments. The only joy there is yourself. But in my stupidity, in my ignorance, I think the only way to taste my self-nature is through the objects. And that binds me to them. So every time I satisfy a desire, what it does to my mind is the same. You mean good sex and ice cream do the same thing to my mind? Yes. I get confused because of the diversity of sensory experience. So the practice here is we have to watch our minds. Watch what it feels like when you want something you don't have. It hurts. Yoga says there's no other suffering. Watch what happens when you satisfy a desire. Pay attention to your pleasure. Notice. Own your own bliss. Mind goes out, Vikshepa Shakti, mind comes home. For a moment, a taste of the self. All yoga says, let's get rid of the middleman. Why not go there directly? Without the need of the medium. It is a non-mediated experience of myself. But the way the Lord has set up the universe for those in ignorance, whatever it is that they think is their God, money, sex, power, approval, the Lord makes that faith firm because that's where I get my juice. That's what makes the world go round. And the whole wheel of karma, the karma chakra, is basically this. Well, that was okay, but that really didn't do it. Maybe I should be a, or try a, or get a, this, that, and the other thing. We go round, 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 never being really satisfied. Until the mind starts to turn inward. Maybe it's the infinite that I seek. Is there something that can give me permanent peace? Any thoughts on this? This is really important to understand because this makes all of yoga practice, all of our Vedanta make sense. Probably the clearest articulation of it actually comes from Buddhism, what the Buddha called the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth, the truth of dukkha, suffering. Life, the way most people live, it sucks. The truth of dukkha. Everybody suffers. Second noble truth, the cause of suffering is kama, craving, or attachment, or thirsting, or longing. Noble truth number 3, the way to be free from suffering is to be free from longing. For the ordinary person, there's only 2 states where we have that. The moment I satisfy a desire, the longing for the object's gone momentarily. Or deep sleep. Deep sleep, I don't want anything. Sure feels good. And then noble truth number 4, the way to be permanently free from craving. It's what the Buddha called the Eightfold Path. It means sadhana. It means spiritual practice. This is the antidote to the ignorance that Krishna is talking about. Any questions about this?
I don't know if it's a question, Jim, but it's a comment. So you were saying that you either see it or you don't. And it just, I don't, in my experience, it's not one event. It doesn't happen just at once. I mean, and the other day when I commented like that, you said like, oh, so you see the rope, but still with the head of a snake. But for me, it has been a process of, giving up a small finite pleasure in exchange of a large infinite pleasure. And like little by little, I've been.
But what I would say, Susali, is you go in and out of it. But when you've been on a retreat, when you've been here in class, when you've had a good meditation, and you're very clear about your essential nature, at that moment, you don't have desires. You're full. Now, 10 minutes later, you may think you're Susali again, and you may have attachments, and you are screaming and yelling at people. Does that make sense? So we do go in and out of it. There's no question about it. So that's why Gita talks about you don't want to be in that in and out stage, that yo-yo stage. You want to be sthita prajna, and you're absolutely right. The way to be steady is continue to give up stuff, give up the attachments, give up the identification. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yeah, thank you.
Good question. All right, next verse. What verse are we on now? Are we on like 21 or 22?
22.
Okay.
Sataya Shraddhaya Yukta Astasya Dhanmahite Labhate Cha Tata Kama Anmaeva Vihitan Hitan. Endowed with that faith, he engages in the worship of that devata, and from it he obtains his desire fulfillments. All these being ordained indeed by me alone.
So this is the Lord's Maya, the way Krishna has set up human existence. So the ordinary person who, say, wants to be a musician, that's the devata, that's the god that they worship. They do the ritual, meaning they take music lessons, they practice, etc. Then they get to give a concert and everybody applauds, or the production company writes them a check. So they get the fruit of that practice, and it strengthens it. So this is what keeps the world going. Each of us finds our own place in the world, what makes us happy, and we're driven toward that. And all of our actions are driven by our desires, which is the metaphor here for the worshiping of each deva, each individual God. And we do that in ignorance. We may go to church on Sunday, but then I work hard all week for other things. And I get on Tinder or Grindr or shoddy.com, whatever it is, to find a partner. Or I'm day trading on the stock market. Whatever it is, where I think I'm going to find happiness. Nothing wrong with that. That's the world. That's the world. Just like the way human minds are made. When at night you go to sleep, on occasion you dream. Everybody does. So here Krishna is saying, this is what makes the world go round. But there are those who can exercise their escape clause and be free. Next verse.
Jim, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
If all activity is just delusion and all desire is delusion, then
Yes.
ultimately
It's all mind. It's all mind. It's all chaitanya. It's all the movement of the play of consciousness.
then the ultimate state for everyone should be to take sannyas, right?
But sannyas itself is an illusion.
So then
That's another activity.
then if the human life is about, like, life means activity and activity must happen, and if all action is maya, then if we were truly not to be influenced by maya, then what must we do?
Okay, that's like saying, I'm going to give up desiring to go to the bathroom. What's going to happen if you make that decision?
Oh, it's not going to happen.
Uh-huh. And what if you were to say, oh, I am a sannyasi, I'm going to command my hair not to grow? What's going to happen with your hair? It's going to
It's
grow.
still
So the world's going to go on, whether you're a woman of knowledge or not. What will change is the way you see it. Now, there's the classic metaphor of the snake and the rope, which I used. The other one that the scriptures use is mirage waters in the desert. So when I'm driving across the desert and I see the mirage, my senses report water and my knowledge is water. Oh dear, I don't know how to get around the lake. But if you keep driving and you see the lake recede, you realize, oh, it's an optical illusion. It's a mirage. but my senses continue to report water, even though my knowledge is sand. So for the woman of knowledge, she puts the robot on automatic pilot. You know, the Deepa machine will do what she does. She'll have affairs, she'll not have affairs. She'll have a job, she'll not have a job. She'll take a vacation, she won't take a vacation. Just like an actor in a play, and you watch it.
But then, Jim,
Go ahead.
when you keep thinking like this, which I have been, the repetition of these ideas in my head, then now sometimes when I work, I feel like it doesn't matter what the outcome is. And so I'm bringing, A, it's less stressful, but B, it's also less effort. Meaning I used to struggle a lot with how much quality I deliver at work, and I used to be OCD about it. And now it's like, whatever. So
Well, if you start to perform badly, your boss will tell you. And then you'll deal with that. I mean, this does not absolve us from karmic responses at the level of the body. So if I were to say, oh, it's all Brahman, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to do a thing, why should I pay the rent? It's all illusion. I'd get an eviction notice. And it's all an illusion. But that doesn't make the world stop. And what you'll find, Deepa, sometimes we motivate out of fear and anxiety and ego. But there's another kind of motivation. And that's the motivation that comes out of just fun and joy and creativity and the satisfaction of a job well done. One of my students, I can't remember who it was now, was studying taiko drumming. And their taiko master said you have to practice taiko drumming until you can drum like a child. You've ever watched a child beating on pots and pans when they're like 2-year-olds? Have you ever had nieces or nephews who've done that? You know, they're just having a blast. They're working. It's not getting something. Or when I was a professional singer, oh, singing is a hard mistress. You can never master her. You never sing the concert perfectly. It never happens. But the fun is to work toward it. I don't know if that helps. But
yes.
You will continue to act because your prarabdha will impel you into it. But you can give up all the mental struggle. Struggle is not the same as work. Kartavya is not karma. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We'll talk more on it. All right. I think we only have 1 or 2 more verses in this chapter. Is that correct? I think there's 24 verses in the 7th chapter. Am I mistaken?
No, it goes up to 26. I'm still scrolling through it. So 27.
All right, I'm mistaken then. We'll take up the rest of them then next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat. Now I can hang out a bit if anybody has questions. You can sign off if you wish, Deepa. We won't need a host at this point.
Yeah, no worries. But I can hang out till everyone leaves.
Any other questions?
Andrea wants to speak to you.
Go for it, Andrea. You're muted.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, that was so awesome. Thank you. Doesn't Krishna recommend karma yoga for most of us? Like in chapter 5, he gets into it.
3, 4, and 5, he recommends karma yoga. But you have to understand that we have preparatory exercises which prepare the mind for deep contemplation, deep self-inquiry. Successful self-inquiry can only be accomplished with a very sattvic mind. Is that a word you've heard before, Andrea? Yes? No?
Yes, sir. Yes.
No, you don't need to call me sir. Anyway, so there are various practices that we do which have as their purpose purifying the head and heart. Karma yoga is one of the most important. This is the incredibly powerful mechanism for exhausting our vasanas. Bhakti yoga is great. Selfless service and intense devotional practice will open the heart. Some people, they're intuitively led to do things like Raja Yoga. So you have the yamas and the niyamas, the moral do's and don'ts that we want to engage in. Then you do asana postures, then you do pranayama, then you use pratyahara, sense withdrawal, then you do dharana, concentration, then you do dhyana, then you finally get to meditation. We've covered all that in chapters 3, 4, and 5. In chapter 6, we learn to meditate. Now in chapter 7, we're getting some of the deeper practices. So we have to understand that it's sequential. The image I use all the time in classes, because I'm a foodie, is slicing tomatoes. I love vine-ripened big tomatoes. Do you like to cook, Andrea?
Yes.
So if you have a really big ripe tomato and you have a dull knife and you want to cut the tomato with the dull knife, what happens?
Squish.
Yeah. So what's the preparatory exercise that you have to do before you can cut that really ripe tomato into slices?
Sharpen.
Yes. Karma yoga is like sharpening your knife. Self-inquiry is the slicing. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, I was thinking of the other question that was asked, and I was just reading something like it doesn't matter if you take sannyas or do this or that or become a householder, because your mind goes with you. So it was like it was commentary on chapter 5 about like the inner detachment, and I thought, oh, that kind of went with the question. I was thinking of that.
Well, and you have to be very honest with where we are. So I had a fellow who studied with me back in the 90s, and 20 years prior, he was a gay man. He had been a disciple of Guru Maharaji, who at that time was like the 14-year-old guru, had an ashram in Florida. And he was in that ashram for a couple of years. And every time he meditated, all he thought about was the sex he wasn't having. Shows up at my meditation center in the city, sits in meditation. Afterward, 20 years later, he's thinking about the sex he didn't have 20 years ago. So you've got to be very careful. If your heart and mind are filled with desires, it's called kartavya, the need to go do stuff in the world. What yoga says is don't suppress. If you do too much suppression, you will make your mind unfit for later practice. Go, act in the world according to your heart's deepest desires. But, chapters 3, 4, and 5, act vigorously in the world according to your swadharma, your passions, your heart's deepest desires, in the yajna spirit. Do it in the spirit of selfless sacrifice, renouncing your attachment to the fruits of action. All we get is the work, never to the fruits. And then in 5th chapter, we work very hard on renouncing our identification with the sense of agency. I am not the doer. It's guna and karma. That's the essence of karma yoga. And if we do that in time, those compulsions wear out. Then the mind naturally turns more inward. But the real sannyas is the renunciation of the mind. It has nothing to do with the outer. There are those of us where it's given us to withdraw from the world. I'm a brahmachari. I haven't had sex for over 20 years. But I used to be a very vulgar man. But I'm not controlling. Not controlling at all. Is that useful?
Totally.
All right. Very good question. Very good question. One of the beauties of Gita is it will give us a practice that's appropriate for wherever we are in our unfoldment. So there's not one practice to be done for all yogis for all time. Depends on how gross or subtle the mind is. This is where a teacher can be useful. Now, everything I'm sharing with you, I use modern examples. Everything I'm sharing with you is in the scriptures. I do not make up my own yoga. Any other questions?
No, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Deepa.
All right, thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Nobody came for in person tonight.
Oh,
All we have are Zoomies, but that's fine. This is what the Lord wants. Hari Om, Zoomies.
Hari
Om
Om.
Tat Sat.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
God bless.
Good night.